Hi, my name is Annie Purdue Olson, and this video series is for us to reflect together on a few heroes of the Bible and the unique and sometimes challenging circumstances that they faced as they were fulfilling the assignment that God had given them. Each video is about 5 minutes long and includes a summary of the story, as well as some questions to get us thinking about how we see God in the story and what impact that might have on our own story. So let's get started. When God told Jeremiah he was to speak the very words of God, Jeremiah responded with doubt because he was so young. Unlike Joshua in our last blog, who was groomed for leadership, Jeremiah was launched into his assignment at a young age, and he never ever had a formal leadership role. Maybe that's why he embraced this limiting belief about his age and what he could and couldn't do as a result of it. But God is not limited by our doubts, and he wasn't with Jeremiah either. He touched Jeremiah's lips in a demonstration of his promise that he would give Jeremiah the words. More than that, God often had Jeremiah demonstrate the message with his actions. One time, God had Jeremiah get a brand new linen, clean linen, shove it in the hole in a rock until it was rotted. And then Jeremiah went back and took the ruined linen and showed it to the people of Israel as a demonstration of how useless they are unless their heart clings to God. You would think with God's words in his mouth, Jeremiah's assignment would explode, but his circumstances were not set up for success, and he actually met active resistance. Maybe that's why he's called the weeping prophet. His life looks like a series of failures and disappointments. He was never able to marry. He didn't have many friends. He was beaten and thrown in the stocks. He was arrested and accused and ridiculed by the people. He was betrayed by his own family. He was thrown in prison, and he was actually tossed into a cistern that was full of mud, sinking in the mud, and left to die. The message that they should submit to the rule of Babylon and surrender to them was not received well by the kings or the people, as you would expect. He was even frustrated with God at many points. In fact, at one point, he called God a deceitful brook, waters that fail. He lived in this tension between what he wanted out of life and then the message that burned in his heart, the assignment that God had given him. He was frustrated when he saw the wicked prosper. At one point, he wished he'd never, ever been born. He threw frustrations out at God about his enemies that would attack him and hoping that God would destroy them. At one point he said, "I quit. I am not going to do this anymore." But the message of God burned in him so much he couldn't resist, he couldn't stop, he couldn't hold it in, and he continued to share the message that God had given him. I'm not sure why God didn't answer directly the questions that Jeremiah had, but instead God responded with empathy, reminded Jeremiah of the assignment that he had been given, and reassured him in the midst of his circumstances. It's not the answer that I would have expected, but it was enough for Jeremiah because it lit the fire inside of his heart again, and he continued to share that message. In fact, at one point, God said, "Jeremiah, if you step out, then the strength that you need will be there." In spite of the fears and the doubts that Jeremiah had, he stepped out in faith and he trusted God and he found joy and delight in the Lord. We sometimes are even called upon to make that same leap of faith, and when we step out, the courage and the strength that we need will be there. Jeremiah knew that God was faithful. He knew God. He was in relationship with God, and that gave him a hope that was bigger than his circumstances. He believed in a promise that was worth more than his struggles. He held on to the hope of redemption that he saw with his prophetic eyes. He knew that a new covenant was coming. It was a better covenant. And he saw the redemption story unfolding, and he knew his part in it. So what I'd like you to do right now is grab your notebook. If you'd like to read some of the Jeremiah story, the verses that are on this blog, and reflect on that, that would be great. When you're done doing that, grab your journal and reflect on these 3 questions. The first question: what resistance in your life is making your God-given assignment difficult in this season? Is it people that are resisting or coming against you? Is it doubts that you have? Are circumstances not working out the way that you thought that they would? Question number 2. What is your question or doubt that you need Jesus to reassure you? Is it questions of age? Is it questions of the evil in the world that you see? Is there something that's discouraging you? Lay those thoughts, those burdens, those cares before the Lord. Question number 3. What anchors your hope in Jesus? For Jeremiah, the story of redemption that he saw unfolding, the faithfulness of God in the midst of his circumstances, were things that anchored his hope throughout his life, which was a very difficult one. So what is it that anchors your hope in Jesus? Spend some time with Jesus. Let him know your thoughts and your feelings, and just let him reassure you. Soak in his presence, soak in his promises, soak in his love, and journal the answers to the questions. And join me for the next video.